springen wieder zurück und finden wir das Jahr 1962.
I think the idea about crusades is part of my interest in general in observing societies in transitions. So for me, the history of the crusades that lasted about less than 200 years is a way to think how a society or human being are willing to dream of the concept of development. So a speech by Pope Urban II in 1095 telling Europeans that they need to go to Jerusalem to free Jerusalem from the Muslims. Actually, during this time it was Turks who are ruling Jerusalem. But so the idea is how to see this dream for people, because they are going to from Europe to Jerusalem, some of them even walking. So we know that maybe half of this first wave died just because of hunger, and they didn't have enough horses and all of that. So how can you think of this people who are like really running after their dream of development? Part of this dream is also the idea that if they die, they will go to heaven. And this is what Pope Urban II was supposedly saying in his speech, that they will go to heaven and he will reserve their seats for them. All of these interests was really the main reason to start this series in the beginning. After that, when I started really to read more and more in it, I found that it's really relating to our contemporary life. Our history, our current history, is based on what happened 1,000 years ago, for sure. It doesn't mean that the history is repeating itself, but it means that what happened 1,000 years ago, you will find a result to it today also. So I found that it's extremely important to try to investigate more this history. And then, of course, it developed more by trying to translate this investigation into a new format, in a new visual experience, basically. The idea of using marionettes started when I was reading about the speech by Pope Urban II. So the speech was not documented during the speech itself, during the event. It was documented after the speech. So if you try to search for what he said, you will find now at least 4 different versions of the same speech. This is for me a way of how we write and believe in written history, because it's created, because it's really a created history, really. But we know that there is a result, so we can easily expect that Pope Urban II had enough charisma as a figure to convince people to really move from Europe to the Levant. It's really big distance. And I think I'm not just saying that this was a way of the church manipulating people, but it was for me just it has to involve a way of manipulation, people manipulating each other to reach for them that they are willing to have this like waves of wars for 200 years, because they think that they are freeing Jerusalem. That's really for me the whole thing. So it started from this idea of the concept of manipulation. And there is another thing I always talk about it, which is that the use of marionette also for me allows the viewer to project himself or herself on the puppet much easier than projecting themselves on professional actors, because also there is no emotions and there is no acting skills. It all depends on the topic and the visual. So for me, that frees the work from drama, which is really, really important for me. This is also very important because it's completely different series. I started this Araba Al Madfuna series in 2011, while I started Cabaret Crusades in 2010. They were working parallel to each other, actually. And they are really, for me, they're using, each one is using different language. One is based on the idea of the analysis of the written history, which is Cabaret Crusades. The other one is based on the idea of how to mix between literature and myth. So it became more like and also the Araba Al Madfuna is more a personal experience. So it's an experience I had when I visited a village called Araba Al Madfuna over 12 years ago, and I was really noticing people during this trip trying to dig underground to discover pharaonic treasures, and the system of digging and discovering these treasures involves a lot of let's say metaphysics for me, because they involve a lot of magical phrases, spells, and phrases from Quran, phrases from Bible, and with this metaphysical system, the main goal is to reach treasure underground, which is pharaonic treasure. So, yeah. So by noticing this, I was thinking to translate this whole experience for me in Araba Al Madfuna is that I need to involve two different systems together to make this experience, to translate this experience. That's why you see kids speaking in adult voices. That's why you see a story happening in front of you visually, but at the same time, the kids are telling another story. That's why it's also inverted image in the last film. So because all of these things are part of the experience that I had there. That I feel that there are people living with metaphysics, but it's all becoming one thing. I believe also it was to make these two exhibitions at the same time was something very, very important for me, because it's not only it's a challenge, of course, to make these two big series and to present them at the same time, but also how to try to make these two exhibitions different, and each one speaks its own language, and this is, and really not to be confused, and to be more clear to think of these two different languages. So I think it's I like, of course, I love that people come and visit this exhibition, and hopefully what I am saying about these two different languages will be visible, because it's at least a way for the artist to not to become running after a trademark or a stereotype, or it's a way really to deal with every content with respect. So it has to have its own language. This has to have its own elements and language. Yeah, that's all. So, yeah.